Hello, my name's Bev and I'm the author of the book Please Eat, A Mother's Struggle to Free Her Teenage Son from Anorexia, which describes our family's battle with the deadly eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, which my teenage son Ben developed back in 2009 when he was just 15 years old. This post is from the 21st of September 2011 and it's about the massive learning curve that I had to go through once I realised that my son was developing an eating disorder, because I knew nothing about eating disorders. And this post is called The Hardest Bit of Cramming I Ever Did. As a freelance copywriter working for countless organisations in many different marketplaces, cramming up on information is second nature. Often I have to get to grips with a client's entire business pretty much instantly in order to write a meaningful website or whatever. Everything from scientific instruments to complicated software platforms. I've crammed up on them all. Likewise, it was second nature to cram up on baby and toddler care during my son's first few years of life. But eating disorders proved to be altogether different. Now, I'm neither a clinician nor an eating disorders professional. I'm just a plain common all garden mum, and I can only write from that viewpoint. But once I realised that Ben was hurtling into an eating disorder, the urge to cram up on information kicked in immediately. The trouble was, I quickly became aware that everywhere I looked, I was getting mixed messages. Also, unlike baby and toddler care, which naturally puts the well-being of the child first, no medical team swooped in to explain exactly what I should do and when, starting right now. So initially I was left with the internet. And like any condition you look up on the internet, there's a ton of different stuff out there. Some of it purporting to be written by experts, some by parents of children with eating disorders, some by the patients themselves, and most of it pretty damn terrifying. Not just in terms of the short and long-term prognosis, but in terms of the way it all seemed to conflict with each other. And that's not even mentioning all the sensationalist tabloid headlines and articles about eating disorders. Even the various helplines I stumbled across offered conflicting advice. I mean, here I was faced with an illness I was rapidly learning could actually destroy my son's life, yet I had no idea which advice to follow, if any, or even if it would work. I didn't know of any other families with teenagers with eating disorders, so I couldn't talk to them. And as you'll know from the previous posts, I was getting precious little help from the medical profession. As a result, those first few months of cramming were a case of trial and error. Thankfully, a number of people came to my rescue. The first was a school nurse who, as you might expect, had some experience of teenagers with eating disorders. Not boys, though, just girls. It was she that first talked to me about the help that was available. It was she that told me about CAMS, the eating disorder treatment available through the NHS for teenagers in the UK. My GP didn't even mention it. The second was a private therapist and former CAMS employee we hired as a stopgap in December 2009 while we were still on the CAMS waiting list. Although I found stopgap treatment pretty useless, a bit like trying to bail out the Titanic with an egg cup, this therapist did help push my learning curve in the right direction. The third came in early 2010 when, just through pure chance, I stumbled across the Around the Dinner Table forum and its parent website, Feast. This forum offers advice and support for parents of teenagers with eating disorders. It has members, moderators and mentors from all over the world, and from the very first moment I discovered it, I knew I'd struck gold. Another excellent thing about Around the Dinner Table and Feast is that the parents that run and moderate it have close links with the world's leading eating disorder specialists. So they're pretty clued up on the latest evidence-based treatment, thinking and publications. The Around the Dinner Table forum enabled me to finally home in on the information that mattered and filter out that which didn't. It also enabled me to talk to people that have been through this experience and come out the other end successfully. I discovered that even though Ben is a boy and that all our children have been catapulted into this mess for a variety of different reasons, their eating disorder behaviours and thinking were uncannily similar. Likewise, the kind of recovery approach that worked tended to be similar. Not identical in every case, of course, but very similar. I only wish to heck that I'd found that forum sooner, 6 months sooner, ideally. The point is, I spent months cramming up on information I wasn't entirely sure was current or even accurate, and the sheer amount of conflicting stuff worried me. After all, my son's life could be at stake here, and unlike other medical conditions, the sufferer can actually resist or refuse treatment. You're not just fighting an illness, you're also fighting your child, which is really weird until you get used to it. I'm not saying that the Around the Dinner Table parents possess the magic bullet that cures eating disorders at a single stroke, or that they know as much as or more than clinicians and other experts. What I am saying is that the forum guided me towards the latest thinking on eating disorders, an illness whose treatment has changed quite radically in recent years. Yet it's also an illness that is so complex, not even the world's leading experts claim to have the complete answer. I get the impression things are still very much at an experimental stage, the tip of a monumental iceberg. Yet certain methods do seem to work, as we in our household have discovered on our own journey. This is why, over the past 18 months or so, I felt sure we are doing the right thing for our son. So to conclude, I'm a dab hand at cramming information quickly and boiling it down into what matters and what doesn't, yet cramming up on eating disorders was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Hopefully, the good thing about the Around the Dinner Table forum and this blog is that it will enable other parents to find their way onto the recovery road a little sooner than we did. And that's the end of that post. Reading this post today in 2023 hammers home how just awful it was, the fact that I quickly realised with all the research I was doing back towards the end of 2009 that eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder. They can and they do kill for a variety of different reasons. And here I was with my son rapidly being consumed by this terrible illness, and yet the medical profession just didn't seem to care. It took ages to get Ben referred to CAMHS, and even then we had to twist the arm of the GP. They just weren't doing anything about it. They just didn't seem to care. And when a month later CAMHS came back saying that the first appointment could be anything from 18 to 22 weeks, the panic I felt as my son was getting worse and worse and worse, and I kept going back to the GP surgery and saying, I need to hurry this up, it's urgent, it's desperately urgent. But they just didn't do anything. They were not interested, and I had no information apart from what I could find on the internet. I knew of no other people who were going through this. There was absolutely nothing for me, no help whatsoever. And it's an absolute disgrace to be in that position with a deadly illness that could kill your child, and yet no one cares. No one cares. And thankfully, at the beginning of 2010, I discovered the wonderful, amazing Around the Dinner Table forum, which I, like many other parents on there, genuinely believe saved our children's lives by putting us in touch with other parents who were going through it, and other parents who had been through it and come out the other end successfully, but who were back there trying desperately to help other parents with support and information. It is just such an amazing resource, and finding that forum was one of the best things that happened, and I really believe it saved my son's life from the information I found on there. Especially as when we began Cam's treatment, even Cam's didn't seem to be taking it that seriously because my son didn't look stick thin, even though he'd lost about a quarter of his body weight by the time he started Cam's treatment. They'd never seen him before when he was a rugby player. There was no record of his height and weight over the last few years. There was nothing to compare him with, and I believe that they really didn't think it was that serious, because very soon into treatment, we're talking within a matter of weeks, they were saying that Ben really needed only to be seen fortnightly, not weekly. And meanwhile, of course, Ben was saying everything's fine, it's only my mum, she's anxious. Everyone was saying that I was too anxious, mum's too anxious, and it was a terrible experience to feel that nobody believed me when I explained how desperate the situation was. And things only got a bit better at Cam's when Ben came clean and said that he'd been pretending at the sessions, pretending everything was okay, when it most definitely was not okay. And at that point, I think Cam's began to take me more seriously and realised that I wasn't just a neurotic mother. But yeah, one of the main reasons I wrote this blog, why I'm recording these videos and why I wrote my book, is to help other parents who have suddenly found themselves in this situation, so they don't have to spend valuable and desperately short time on cramming up on eating disorders, that I can hopefully direct them to the Around the Dinner Table forum, where they will find help and support, and hopefully just so they know someone else has been through this, they're not alone in this. And if I can fast track them through the learning curve as well, so they can get their child diagnosed and into treatment as soon as possible, hopefully that will result in a faster and more sustained recovery. And that is so important to me, that other families don't go through what we went through. And I always say to parents, trust your instinct. If something isn't right, if the alarm bells are ringing, then listen to your instincts, because they're probably right. And also, if you feel you're not getting the response you should be getting from whoever it is, whether it's the GP or whoever rolls out the waiting list for treatment, just I always say just almost tie yourself to the railings type thing, chain yourself to the railings to make a nuisance of yourself to get to your child's scene. Because obviously our children are the most important thing in our lives. I mean, I don't really need to say more, do I? Anyway, you've listened to me for quite a long time here, and thanks so much for listening right through to the end of this. And you'll find a link below to the Around the Dinner Table forum, and I urge you to visit the forum and introduce yourself if you are a parent facing this for the first time. Thank you for listening. You'll find a link below to my blog, and you'll also find a link to my website where you can download free PDFs of my blog, and also a link to Amazon where you can buy a copy of my book.